Hey everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. It is Wednesday today, which means we are on Killer Wednesday. So I just want to preface this by saying I will be going into the psychology as I usually do, but this is not to justify their actions, it's not to give them any sort of excuse, it's just a possible explanation for the things that took place. This will also be the last Killer Wednesday of 2022. And my last video of the whole year will be Saturday for Saturday's Haunting Hour, and then we'll be back on the 11th of January. Now, today's story is about an actor that you might have known. Like, I saw him in a couple of things. His name's Johnny Lewis. I saw him in Raise Your Voice. I don't think I saw him in anything else, but he was in quite a few things, so you might know him just because of that. And so we are going to get into today's story about Johnny Lewis. So Johnny Lewis was born October 29th, 1983 in Los Angeles, and he began acting at a very, very young age. And I also want to note he was also born into like a Scientology family, which kind of comes up a bit later. His mum began taking him on auditions from the age of like 6, I believe. And he was this kind of blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy, and he won over every single person that he went to meet on these auditions. Very soon after he started these auditions, he was put in commercials and then various TV shows like Malcolm in the Middle and Drake and Josh when he was like younger and a teenager. As he was growing older, he began getting jobs within the OC, which was a series I think back in like 2006, and in Criminal Minds. Although he was relatively successful, he was known to be quite different to other actors. He would mainly just keep to himself, but he did live in Frat Row, which is a known place for Hollywood actors to live, I think. And it was also at this time that he actually dated singer Katy Perry from 2005 to 2008. However, he didn't like parties, and like I said, he just preferred staying in. And a quote from his friend, "That's what made Johnny special. No drugs, no alcohol." And this was like one of his friends. He was, like I said, born into a Scientology family, but he left the faith in his 20s. I don't believe his family had a problem with this. It just so happened that he didn't want to be part of the faith anymore. At this time, he also starred alongside Hilary Duff in Raise Your Voice. And his most famous role, I believe at the time, was as half-sack in the first 2 seasons of Sons of Anarchy. However, I believe he wanted to be written off the show because for him the show was getting very violent and he didn't want to be a part of that, so the casting directors wrote him out of the show. 2009 was said to be his last good year. Like I said, he did leave Sons of Anarchy after 2 seasons due to it being too violent. He also found out at the time that his kind of on-off girlfriend Diane Marshall Green was pregnant. In 2010, his daughter was born. However, this relationship, by the time their daughter was born, was pretty much non-existent, and unfortunately, there was a feud between the couple. It's not said what it was about, but there was a very kind of horrible custody battle, and unfortunately, he did lose that. I don't know if he was able to see his daughter on weekends or not. I'm not entirely sure. It didn't say that anywhere. By this time, Lewis actually wanted to step back from acting because he actually saw himself as more of a writer. And at this point, he began writing screenplays and the beginnings of 2 novels, I believe. And he had a journal that was filled with philosophical quotes and sayings. At this time, he had also heard of a place called the Writer's Villa, and this was through a photographer friend, and it was then because of this that he actually became very interested. The Writer's Villa was a house in Beverly Hills for creative people to stay, and it was run by a very nice lady, and he moved in April 2009 and moved into the Red Suite on the second floor. He reportedly really took to the villa, he really loved it, and his friends reported, I remember all the nice things he said about her, about his landlady, which we'll get into a bit later. During his time here, like I said, Lewis had quit Sons of Anarchy and had a daughter. And it was at this time, I believe it was 2010, unfortunately, that he was involved in a very serious motorcycle accident, and this is where things kind of go wrong. On October 31st, 2011, Lewis suffered a head injury from the motorcycle accident. However, at the hospital, he didn't show any signs of concussion, and they just let him go. They didn't test MRIs or anything like that, but it is believed that he had suffered some sort of brain injury and damage to his brain, which caused really bizarre behaviour. Like I said, at this time, his behaviour became very bizarre, very erratic, and this then led to several arrests for kind of petty crimes. And it was at this time that Lewis decided to go and move back in with his parents just so they could keep an eye on him. His dad did schedule MRI tests due to Lewis's behaviour being so out of character for him, but Lewis refused this. His family also attempted to get him psychiatric help, but again, he refused this help for a while. So going into what this means psychologically, it is thought that due to this accident and the changes in Lewis's behaviour, he did suffer some sort of trauma to the brain or some sort of brain injury, and that this caused some excuse me, brain damage. It is believed that this then caused bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So although schizophrenia is usually said to be genetic, if there is some damage to certain parts of the brain, it can cause schizophrenia and other mental illnesses. So according to a study that I read, every 1 in 10 people diagnosed with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia did have a brain injury. So Lewis's behaviour at this time, like I said, he was getting aggressive and irritated very easily. He was known to have very erratic behaviours and known to get irritated easily, leading to violence. And that is also part of bipolar disorder due to these up and down behaviours. But it is also believed he had schizophrenia along with bipolar. Lewis, don't know where my brain is today. Lewis was arrested 3 times between 2011 and 2012. January 2012, he struck 2 men with a bottle while fighting. He then had his second arrest 6 weeks later, where he was accused of attempting to break into a woman's home. It was clear that the actor was suffering due to this accident and the brain injury, and he was suffering from some kind of mental illness at this point. It was then reported that Lewis had attempted suicide at this point. He became hypersensitive to light, and it was that bad that he actually disabled his parents' fuse box. Those close to Lewis also commented on his changes. Quote, he was another person completely, end quote. Another quote, he vacillated between lucid conversation and incoherence, end quote. And this is where the schizophrenia comes in. However, at this time, over the summer months, Lewis did seem to improve. He actually spent time at a psychiatric facility in Ridgeview Ranch. The facility offered treatment for psychosis, and he was prescribed medications for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. A journal entry was found from July 2012. I felt more whole today, more complete, like parts of myself had been scattered but now began to return, end quote. At this time, due to violent outburst, he was sentenced to a year in jail, but he only served 6 weeks due to overcrowding in the jail. His father, so at this time he was still living at home, but because he was getting a lot better, his father then arranged for him to stay back at the writer's villa because he was very happy there. And he believed that this would help stabilise Lewis's mood. September 26, 2012, 5 days after leaving prison, Lewis became agitated in his new home. And I believe that he wasn't, because no one was watching him, I think that he wasn't taking his meds. It was unclear what upset him this day. Friends thought that the landlady may have told him off for disabling the fuse box due to the light sensitivity. However, after introducing himself to his new neighbour, Lewis confronted this neighbour, the landlady, in her bedroom. And at this point, Lewis unfortunately beat his landlady to death before killing her cat in the same way. And again, this just wasn't like Lewis. This behaviour was so odd for him, and it had only happened since his motorcycle accident, and he clearly needed a lot of help. The coroner noted that Lewis had fractured the landlady's skull and completely obliterated the left side of her face. Following this attack, Lewis returned to the neighbour's garden and had attacked a painter and punched the neighbour, who had basically got involved. He then chased the painter and their neighbours into their house, and at this point he kind of just abruptly left and went back to his villa. It is believed that he jumped 15 feet from his villa roof, unfortunately dying, and it's unknown whether he did this because, as like a suicide or whether it was an accident. It's unknown. Police then responded after a woman had found the landlady, the cat, and then Lewis all dead at the scene. Much of the media speculated that Lewis was on drugs at this time. However, his autopsies showed that he had no drugs in his system. And his lawyer quoted, "Johnny had a lot of problems, a lot of mental problems, and we recommended treatment, but he declined." And unfortunately, that's the really sad story of Johnny Lewis. So as we can see, like, before the accident, he wasn't violent, he wasn't aggressive, he was quite a mellow person. He had never been in trouble with the police before. And then, unfortunately, as soon as he had this head trauma, his life just spiraled out of control. And it is so sad because if he continued on his meds, or if he had maybe stayed at the ranch for a little longer, the events might not have occurred, but we'll never know, unfortunately. And yeah, it's just such a sad story. So like I said, this is the last Killer Wednesday video of the year, and I hope you've enjoyed watching these videos. I will be back in the new year, don't worry. But I love making these videos. I love doing the research. I love looking into the psychology. And if you have any cases you would like me to look into for next year, 2023, definitely let me know below in the comments. And hit that subscribe button, because in the new year, like I said, I'll be back twice a week. But apart from that, I will be back on Saturday for Saturday's haunting